There is a rest more powerful than all your toil, a silence more creative than all your striving. In that holy stillness, all things are finished, waiting only for you to enter and claim them. Tonight, I will show you how to step into that rest and awaken to a world where every desire is already yours. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. These words are not a call from some far-off throne in the clouds, not the beckoning voice of an external ruler over your fate, but the eternal invitation of your own being. They are spoken from the deep, still core of the I am that you are, the same I am that declared before Abraham was I am. They speak now as they have spoken since the beginning, bidding you to lay down the heavy yoke of striving and enter the divine Sabbath, that holy stillness where all things are already complete. The weariness of which the scripture speaks is not merely the tiredness of the body from toil, but the deeper fatigue of the soul that labors in the false belief that it must earn, build, and fight for that which has already been given. The burden is the effort of trying to shape reality by force, the endless wrestling with appearances, the anxiety of wondering when and how your desire will come to pass. The rest offered is the complete opposite. It is not the pause between two efforts, but the cessation of all effort. It is the knowledge that creation is finished and that nothing you desire needs to be created anew, for it already exists in the unseen and awaits only your acceptance. Imagine for a moment a banquet prepared for you. The table groans under the weight of every delicacy you could desire. The cup overflows with the finest wine, and the host, who is none other than your own eternal self, smiles upon you and says, all is ready. Come and dine. Now imagine turning from that table and running into the streets to gather scraps, convincing yourself that only through your own sweat will you be fed. That is the state of the world, running in pursuit of what is already waiting, blind to the feast within. The words, I will give you rest, are the reminder that the feast has always been yours. I once knew a man who had spent years trying to establish his business. He labored from dawn until deep into the night, worried over every fluctuation in trade, and pushed himself to exhaustion, believing that relentless effort was the only road to success. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, he sat in silence and recalled this scripture. Something within him stirred. He thought, what if this rest is real? What if all I seek is already mine, and my work is only to accept it? That night he lay down, not thinking of tomorrow's tasks, but imagining himself in possession of the success he longed for. He felt the satisfaction, the relief, the joy of accomplishment, and he fell asleep in that state. Within weeks, without any direct action on his part, a partnership was offered to him that opened doors he had struggled for years to unlock. The rest he entered inwardly produced the work outwardly. The invitation to come unto me is the call to turn inward, to leave the outer world of effects and enter the inner world of cause. The me is your awareness, the Lord of your being, and to come unto it is to abide in the state of already having. To labor and be heavy laden is to live in the belief that the outer world dictates your life, that you must wait upon circumstances, people, or events before you can rest. The truth is reversed to you. You must first rest in the conviction of the wish fulfilled, and the outer world will follow. Think of the Sabbath described in Scripture. On the seventh day, God rested from all his work, for the work was finished. The Sabbath is not one day of the week. It is the state of consciousness in which you rest, knowing the thing desired is already accomplished. When you enter that state, you cease all mental effort to make it so, and you enjoy it in imagination as though it were already fact. This is not a vague daydream. It is the deliberate choice to dwell in the end, to occupy the feeling of completion until it is as real inwardly as any physical possession. Consider the words of the psalmist. She maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. The green pastures are the states of fulfillment prepared for you. The still waters are the quiet depths of your own mind, undisturbed by the winds of doubt or fear. To lie down in them is to enter the Sabbath rest, not physically reclining, but mentally accepting that the thing is done. And when you do so, you will find that "my cup runneth over" is not poetic fancy, but a description of your own experience. I once spoke with a woman who desired greatly to change her living conditions. She lived in a small, dim apartment and longed for a spacious home filled with light. She had looked at many houses, saved what little she could, but it seemed impossible for her means. One night, she decided to set aside all thought of how it would happen. She closed her eyes and imagined herself in the new home, feeling the warmth of sunlight through large windows, hearing her footsteps echo in wide rooms, smelling the fresh paint. She did this not with effort, but with the ease of one who is already there. She repeated this nightly, not as a chore, but as a pleasure, until the state felt natural. Less than 3 months later, a relative she barely knew contacted her to offer a home they no longer needed, free of charge, save for a token rent well within her means. She had not toiled for it in the outer world. She had simply entered the rest inwardly, and the outer conformed. This is the mystery of rest. It is not passivity, but the most powerful activity of the soul. For in that stillness, you are aligning with the eternal fact of your desire. You are withdrawing attention from the shadows of the outer world and fixing it upon the reality in the inner world, which is the only reality that creates. The outer is but a mirror, the inner is the cause. We are told, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. To stand still is to refrain from the restless search for signs, the anxious questioning of when and how, and to rest in the assurance that it is done. Salvation, in the mystical sense, is the manifestation of your desire, the deliverance from lack, limitation, or fear into the abundance of the fulfilled state, and it is always seen when you are still enough to perceive it. In your own life, you may have experienced moments when a solution appeared the very moment you stopped struggling. You might have wrestled with a problem for days, turning it over in your mind, seeking every possible answer. And then, in a quiet moment when you gave up the effort, the answer came. That moment of release, of inward surrender, is the same principle. In the higher sense, it is the way to every fulfilled desire. To give you rest is not merely to soothe you, it is to place you in possession of the finished work. It is the rest of a builder who has laid the last stone, of a writer who has penned the final word, of a traveler who has reached his destination. It is the end from the beginning, the state in which there is nothing left to be done, for all is accomplished. And this rest is entered, not by waiting for circumstances to change, but by accepting, here and now, in the inner chamber of imagination, that the change is already made. The world will tell you that nothing comes without hard work, that rest is for those who have earned it, that success is the reward of struggle. But the scripture turns this upside down. Rest is not the result of the blessing, it is the cause of it. You rest first, and the blessing follows. This is why the Sabbath is at the end of creation in the story, yet in reality it is the foundation of it. The moment you enter the Sabbath in consciousness, the outer begins to move to match it. If you can accept this, you will see that your greatest work is to rest. This is the paradox of spiritual law, to do nothing in the outer while doing everything in the inner. In imagination, you see, hear, touch, and feel the reality of your desire. You walk in it, converse in it, rejoice in it, until it feels so natural that you forget the old state. Then the outer mirrors this acceptance, and the thing desired appears in your world without strain. It is written, before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. This is the eternal nature of the finished creation. The answer exists before the request is formed. The supply is present before the demand is felt. Resting in this truth is the key to receiving it. You do not have to create the thing, you need only to align with it, to step into the state where it is already yours. And so, when you hear these words, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest," hear them as the voice of your own consciousness calling you home. Leave behind the burden of waiting upon the outer world. Turn inward to the banquet that is already set, the pasture that is already green, the waters that are already still. In that rest, every longing is met, every need is supplied, every prayer is answered, not tomorrow, but now, in the eternal present where all is finished. The law is simple, yet it is the most ignored truth in the world. As you rest in the assumption of already having, the world moves to make it so. There is no striving, no anxious grasping, no bargaining with the unseen. Only the quiet acceptance that what you have imagined as true is, in fact, already established in the unseen. What you call the future is not a place where things will be created for you. It is merely the portion of the eternal. Now you have not yet stepped into with your senses. All that will ever be exists now, and your assumption determines the portion you will encounter. When you cease from effort, when you lay aside the mental noise of how and when and abide in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you have aligned yourself with the already accomplished fact. This is the true Sabbath rest, not idleness, not passivity, but the deep, immovable confidence that the work is done. In that state, all action that is necessary in the outer will arise naturally and without strain, as effortlessly as breathing. You may look at your life and see certain desires yet unfulfilled, and it is tempting to believe they do not yet exist. But imagine the seed beneath the soil. It has not yet broken the surface, yet the plant exists in its entirety within it. You cannot see the flower, but the flower is there in potential, already determined in form and color, waiting only for the appointed season to reveal itself. Your assumption is the planting of that seed. The outer world's events are but the growth to the surface. One must learn to withdraw the senses from the outer world long enough to plant the seed of assumption in the inner world. It is there in imagination that you accept as true the state you desire. To dwell in the assumption is to live mentally as though it were already your reality, to feel the satisfaction, the relief, the gratitude of completion. When this state becomes natural to you, when you can walk in the world feeling inwardly that it is so, you have already set in motion the unseen currents that will carry you to its physical counterpart. I knew a man who, in the depths of financial ruin, chose to stop asking how he would pay his debts. He stopped rehearsing his troubles and began each night to dwell in the feeling of one who was entirely free from lack. He imagined receiving letters of gratitude, hearing words of praise for his generosity, seeing himself giving freely to others. He did not concern himself with the steps, he simply enjoyed the end as though it were here. Within a matter of weeks, a property he had all but forgotten was sold through the efforts of another, clearing his debts and leaving him with more than he had before his troubles began. The world, which once seemed so hostile, had rearranged itself without his outer effort, simply because he aligned himself with the inner state of abundance. The inner law is not a law of chance, it is a law of certainty. To the one who understands it, there is no such thing as luck. There is only the reflection of the state held within. Hold lack in consciousness, and lack will be mirrored. Hold abundance, and abundance will be drawn to you as surely as the compass needle to the north. It matters not whether the world sees the cause, you will know it is your assumption that has called it forth. There is a phrase in Scripture, "Therefore I say unto you, what things soever ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye have received them, and ye shall have them." Notice the tense, not believe that you shall receive, but believe that you have received. This is the key to the law. You are not to hope for the desire, nor wait to see if it will come. You are to accept it now as though it were already yours. This belief, This inward possession is the act that sets the creative power in motion. The world teaches the reverse. It tells you to believe after you have seen. It says, I will believe I am wealthy when the money is in my hand. I will believe I am loved when the person appears. I will believe I am healed when the symptoms vanish. Yet the law of consciousness says, believe first, and you will see. The outer is but the echo of the inner. If you wait to see before you believe, you will wait forever. But if you believe before you see, the seeing will follow without fail. To dwell in the assumption of already having is not to pretend in the childish sense. It is to take upon yourself the feeling of the accomplished fact until your mind no longer questions it. If tonight you desire to be in another country, and you could, without effort, feel yourself there, smell the air, hear the language, walk the streets, and you persisted in this inward journey until it felt natural, you would find yourself there in the outer world by perfectly natural means. The same law applies to every desire, whether it be for wealth, health, love, or any other good thing. I once heard of a woman who longed to be reconciled with a dear friend from whom she had been estranged for years. She had tried letters, messages through others, but nothing softened the distance. One evening she chose to forget the outer story entirely. She closed her eyes and imagined sitting once more with her friend, hearing the familiar laughter, feeling the warmth of the reunion. She fell asleep in this state night after night, not as a repetition of effort, but as a nightly return to what she knew to be true inwardly. Then, without any direct action from her, a mutual acquaintance brought them together at a gathering neither had planned to attend. The reconciliation was as complete as she had imagined it, and the years of separation vanished as though they had never been. The mind will often try to intrude with its questions. How will this come to pass? Through whom? By what means? But the law does not ask you to know the means. It asks only that you accept the end. The means are the domain of the unseen intelligence which operates through all things. The moment you claim the end in consciousness, the means begin to arrange themselves, often in ways you could never have devised. If you try to dictate the means, you limit the law to the narrow confines of your reasoning. If you release the means, you allow it to draw upon infinite resources. The earth does not question how the seed will grow. It receives it, nourishes it in darkness, and lets the unseen life within it push to the surface in due season. So it is with your assumptions. You plant them in the fertile soil of your consciousness, you nourish them with feeling, and you rest. You do not dig up the seed each day to see if it is growing. You trust the law of life. Creation is finished. This is a statement that few grasp in its fullness. It means that every possible state of being already exists in the infinite. You are not bringing something into existence out of nothing. You are selecting by your assumption, which already existing reality you will experience. When you change your assumption, you change your selection. This is why two people in the same circumstances can have entirely different lives. They are dwelling in different states within the same infinite field. To one who understands this, there is no need to compete, for no one can take from you the state you occupy. If you dwell in the state of wealth, it will come to you through channels that are yours alone. If you dwell in the state of love, the relationships that reflect it will form around you without strain. You may watch others striving, struggling, pushing their way through, but you will know that the surest path is the quiet assumption of the end. There is a rest more powerful than all effort, and it is the rest of knowing it is done. This rest is not passivity, but the perfect alignment of the inner with the desired outer. It is the confidence of the artist who sees the completed masterpiece in the mind before the brush ever touches the canvas, of the architect who walks the halls of the building in thought before the foundation is laid, of the composer who hears the symphony in silence before the first note is played. They do not doubt the reality of what they have seen inwardly. They proceed as though it were already finished. And so you too must proceed in the same way. See it inwardly, accept it inwardly, feel it inwardly, and then rest knowing that the unseen power has already set in motion the perfect means to bring it into visibility. If the outer seems unchanged for a time, do not be moved. The seed is growing beneath the soil, and its appearance is certain. Your only task is to remain in the state until it hardens into fact. This is the inner law. What you assume to be true, though unseen, will become seen. What you persist in feeling as real will solidify in the outer world. What you refuse to accept inwardly can never appear outwardly, no matter how much you strive. And when you truly understand this, you will see that the greatest action you can take is to abide in the end, for in the end all is already yours. Close your eyes for a moment and let us step into the only place where all creation begins, the inner chamber of imagination. It is here, and only here, that the world is shaped. The outer is but the shadow, the inner is the substance. If you wish to hold the shadow in your hands, you must first mold the form from which it is cast. That form is not stone, wood, or metal, but the living clay of your own consciousness. When you imagine, you are not playing with idle pictures. You are entering into a reality that is just as solid, just as actual as the one you touch with your physical hands. The senses of the outer man may not yet perceive it, but the senses of the inner man move freely within it. This is why it is written, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Substance is not created when the thing appears. The substance exists the moment you accept it inwardly. The evidence is the inward vision and feeling, not the outward fact. To guide yourself into the vision of your fulfilled desire, you must begin with the end in mind. Do not start from the place of wanting. That would only magnify the want. Begin from the place of having. See yourself as already in possession of the thing you long for. Feel the satisfaction of it being yours. Smell the air of that place. Hear the sounds that surround you in that condition. Taste the joy that fills you. You are not to watch yourself from a distance, as though you were seeing another person. You are to occupy the body, the mind, the feeling of the one who has already attained. This is not daydreaming. It is the deliberate assumption of the end, and it carries with it the creative force that shapes your outer world. A man once came to me with the desire to own a certain home. He had admired it for years, but believed it far beyond his means. Night after night, instead of dwelling on his inability, he entered into the vision of already living there. He imagined himself lying in bed in the master bedroom, feeling the smooth texture of the walls, hearing the creak of the floorboards in the hallway, smelling the faint scent of flowers drifting in through the open window. He did this until the feeling of living there became so natural to him that he stopped questioning how it could happen. In less than a year, through an unexpected series of events, he was offered the house at a price he could easily afford. The owner, for personal reasons, wanted it to go to someone who would love it, and no one loved it more than the man who had already lived in it night after night in imagination. The vision must be felt with all the senses you can summon. If your desire is for financial freedom, then in imagination handle the money, feel its texture, hear the crisp sound of the notes as you count them. Smell the scent of new bills, feel the weight of gold coins in your hand, or the cool, smooth surface of silver. Hear the voice of a friend congratulating you on your success, and feel the warmth of their handshake. If it is love you seek, then in imagination, feel the arm of your beloved around you. Hear the tone of their voice as they speak words of affection. Feel the brush of their hair against your cheek. The more real it is to you inwardly, the more inevitable it becomes outwardly. One of the greatest mistakes people make is to imagine in a detached way, as though they were observers watching a play. You must enter the scene as the main actor, not as the audience. Stand within it, move within it, speak and hear within it. When you do this, the vision is impressed upon your subconscious not as a possibility, but as a present reality, and the subconscious, having received it as real, will faithfully produce it in your outer experience. It is written, "When ye pray, believe that ye have received them, and ye shall have them." Prayer in this sense is not the begging for a favor from above, but the entering into the state of already having received. The vision in imagination is the prayer. The feeling of fulfillment is the amen that seals it. Once you have accepted it, you need not repeat it anxiously. You may return to it for the pleasure of it, but not from the fear that it is not yet yours. Fear destroys the seed, pleasure nourishes it. There was a woman who longed to be reunited with her husband after a long separation. They were living in different cities, each absorbed in their own affairs, with little communication. She began to imagine, each night before sleep, that she was lying beside him once more. She felt the warmth of his body next to hers, heard his steady breathing, and experienced the deep sense of security she had known when they were together. She persisted in this vision until it was so real to her that the outer separation felt like a fading dream. Then one day, without any effort on her part, he called to say he was coming to see her. That visit led to their permanent reunion. She had brought the outer event into alignment with the inner vision. Do not think that imagination is a lesser reality than the world you see with your eyes. In truth, the outer world is the lesser, for it is the copy, not the original. The original is within. To imagine your desire as fulfilled is to lay hold of the original mold from which the copy must be made. If the copy you now hold in the outer is not to your liking, do not waste your time striking at the shadow, change the mold within. Many people say they cannot imagine vividly, yet they imagine all the time without knowing it. Worry is imagination. Fear is imagination. Envy is imagination. You imagine when you picture the worst possible outcome, when you rehearse arguments in your mind, when you relive old wounds. If you can do this, you can also imagine the best. The same faculty that paints scenes of trouble can paint scenes of triumph. The only difference is the choice of subject. When you give your attention to the vision of your fulfilled desire, you are feeding it with life. Attention is the food of the mind. Withdraw your attention from what you do not wish to experience, and it will wither away. Give your full attention to what you wish to experience, and it will grow into form. You cannot serve two masters. You cannot dwell in the feeling of lack and the feeling of fulfillment at the same time. Choose one, and the other will fade. Sometimes the outer world will seem to contradict your inner vision. Appearances may rise to tell you that nothing has changed. Do not be moved by them. They are but the dying echoes of your old state of consciousness. Stand firm in the vision, and the outer must eventually reflect it. The law is unfailing as within, so without. I recall a young man who desired to be a concert pianist. He had little money, no connections, and only a small, upright piano in his modest apartment. Each night, after his day's work, he would sit at that piano and in imagination hear himself playing on the grand stage of a great concert hall. He could feel the weight of the keys beneath his fingers, hear the rich sound of the grand piano, see the audience rising to their feet in applause. In the outer, he played the same small instrument, but inwardly he lived in the hall of his dreams. Within 2 years, he was invited to perform with a respected orchestra in one of the finest venues in the country. What seemed impossible was simply the outer catching up to the inner. The key to this work is persistence, not struggle. You do not force the vision, you return to it with joy, night after night, until it feels as natural as your current reality. When it does, the change in the outer will be swift and sure. You need not know how it will come, you need only to know that it will. The how is the work of the unseen, which will weave together all that is required. And so, Each night before you sleep, withdraw from the day's events, however they may appear, and enter into the vision of your fulfilled desire. Let it be so real that you fall asleep in it, carrying it with you into the depths of the subconscious. There it will take root, and in its own perfect time, it will rise to the surface of your life as the very thing you imagined. Everything in this world begins first as an unseen state. That which you now call fact was once only a thought, a mood, an inner possession. And in the same way, that which you now long for exists already in a state you have not yet made visible. This is why it is written, the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. The outer world is not the cause, it is the effect. The cause is always invisible at first, and that invisible cause is your inner state. If a man stands in the state of lack, every circumstance, every event, every encounter will echo that lack, no matter what temporary gain he may appear to have. And if a man stands in the state of abundance, the world will conspire to supply him with proof of his abundance, even if his present surroundings seem bare. The state you occupy precedes the fact. The fact is only the shadow cast by the state. To attempt to change the shadow without changing the object that casts it is to labor in vain. I once knew a man who inherited a sum of money. At the time, he was inwardly in a state of fear and smallness, though he had never spoken of it openly. The inheritance appeared to change his outer circumstances overnight, yet within a few short years it was gone. Why? Because his inner state was one of lack, and that state demanded expression. The money was only a fact, a shadow, and once the shadow had no state of abundance to sustain it, it dissolved. The state had preceded the fact, and the fact returned to match the state. Contrast this with another man I knew who possessed very little outwardly, but lived inwardly in the state of security and plenty. He never spoke of fear regarding supply, never rehearsed the language of limitation, but walked with the quiet assurance that all he needed was already his. Over time, his world rearranged itself to match this state. Opportunities came to him without desperate searching. Friendships and resources formed around him as naturally as fruit grows on a tree. By the time he was considered wealthy by others, the inner wealth had long been his. The world tells you that you must first acquire the fact, and then you may enjoy the feeling. But the law of life is the reverse. First comes the feeling, the assumption, the state, and then comes the fact. The feeling does not follow the fact follows the feeling. Think of the farmer who plants a seed. The fact of the harvest is not yet visible, but the seed has been sown in the invisible soil. The farmer acts as one who knows the harvest will come. He does not plant the seed and then complain that there is no crop. He does not pull up the earth each morning to check if the roots are forming. He understands that the unseen work precedes the visible result. So it is with every desire you hold. The seed is your assumption, the soil is your subconscious mind, the harvest is the fact made visible. I recall the story of a woman who longed for a change in her employment. She was overworked, undervalued, and underpaid, yet she feared leaving her position because she could see no immediate opportunity elsewhere. One evening, she decided she would no longer live in the state of being undervalued. She did not quit her job that night. She did not write a single letter of application. Instead, she began to enter nightly into the feeling of being respected, well compensated, and surrounded by people who appreciated her contribution. She imagined hearing her new employer praise her work, seeing her pay reflected in her bank account, feeling the lightness of going to work with joy. Within weeks, without any forced effort, a former colleague contacted her about a position in another firm. The offer exceeded her present salary and matched the conditions she had inwardly assumed. The outer change had been preceded entirely by the inner change of state. You may look at the outer facts of your life and call them reality. but they are nothing more than the embodied history of the states you have occupied. You may change them at any time by changing the state within. The state is a mood, a habitual feeling of being, an inner position from which you view the world. You can occupy the state of health while the body still shows signs of illness. You can occupy the state of wealth while your outer purse seems empty. You can occupy the state of being loved even when there is no one at your side. These inner positions are not make-believe. They are the creative cause, and the outer facts will come into alignment with them in due season. Sometimes the world will tempt you to abandon your state by confronting you with contradictory facts. If you have assumed the state of wealth, you may still receive a bill that seems beyond your means. If you have assumed the state of health, you may still hear an unwelcome report from a physician. These are but the remnants of old states, the harvest of yesterday's planting. Do not mistake them for the harvest of your present seed. If you persist in your chosen state, these old facts will fade, and new facts will take their place. The parables are filled with this truth. The prodigal son, while yet feeding on the husks, remembered the abundance of his father's house. In that remembrance, in that inner return, he changed his state, and the outer journey home unfolded naturally from that change. He did not wait until he had fine garments before feeling himself restored. He felt himself restored while still in rags, and that feeling preceded the fact. In another story, a man lay beside a pool for many years, waiting for the moving of the water. His state was one of waiting, of hoping for some future event to bring his healing. But the instruction he received was simple: rise, take up thy bed and walk. In other words, occupy now the state you would occupy if the fact were already so. Stand in the reality of your desire, and the fact will follow. If you understand this principle, you will see why certain efforts fail. To act outwardly while remaining inwardly in the same state is to labor without true cause. You may change your location, your occupation, even your relationships, but if you carry the same inner state into the new conditions, the facts will eventually resemble the old ones. The outer changes without the inner change are like painting the walls of a house whose foundation is crumbling. The appearance may improve for a time, but the underlying state will produce the same cracks. The key is to live inwardly in the end you desire, regardless of the outer facts. Let the feeling of the end so permeate you that the old state loses its grip. If you are in the state of health, you will naturally take actions consistent with health without strain or self-denial. If you are in the state of abundance, you will naturally see opportunities that others overlook. If you are in the state of love, you will naturally express warmth and kindness that draw others to you. These outer actions are not forced, they are the effortless result of the inner position you occupy. One man told me that he had tried for years to improve his financial situation. He had read books, taken courses, sought out every piece of advice he could find, yet nothing seemed to last. When he learned of the principle of state preceding fact, he realized he had been working from the state of trying to be wealthy, which is still the state of not being wealthy. He changed his approach entirely. Each night, he would imagine himself already living in the abundance he desired. He felt the relief of paid bills, the security of savings, the joy of giving freely. He persisted in this without looking for immediate proof. In time, an idea came to him for a service he could offer, one perfectly suited to his skills and interests. The business grew rapidly, and within a few years he was living the very life he had imagined. The world may call such stories coincidence or luck, but those who understand the law know they are the natural unfolding of the state assumed. Just as surely as night follows day, the fact follows the state. Do not underestimate the power of even a brief occupancy of your desired state. A single moment of intense, undivided acceptance can outweigh weeks of scattered thought. The key is not the length of time, but the quality of the feeling. If, For a moment, you can feel the thrill of accomplishment, the deep satisfaction of completion, as though it were happening now. You have planted a seed that will not fail to grow. And remember this, the state is yours to choose at every moment. You are not bound by the facts of the past, for those facts were only the reflections of past states. You are free to leave them behind the instant you decide to stand in a new position within yourself. The outer world cannot resist the change forever. It must bow to the inner shift. The question is never whether the state will produce the fact. It always will. The only question is whether you will persist in the state long enough for the fact to appear. For just as the seed needs its season to grow, your assumption needs its season to harden into reality. If you change the seed, you change the harvest. If you change the state, you change the fact. Faith is not the mere acceptance of a statement as true. It is the bold appropriation of that truth as your present reality, even when all outer senses cry out against it. It is the unseen possession of that which you desire, so vividly felt that you no longer reach for it. You hold it. To sustain the feeling of the wish fulfilled is to walk in a world that to others appears unchanged, yet to you is already transformed. The outer world may speak of delay, of impossibility, of lack, but you have withdrawn your consent from appearances and fixed your gaze upon the invisible fact. When a seed is planted in the earth, there is no outward sign on the first day, or the second, or perhaps the 10th. Yet the wise gardener does not dig up the seed to check if it is growing. He trusts the process. He knows that the unseen work is the truest work, and that the life within the seed is active though his eyes cannot behold it. So it is with the seed of your desire. Once you have sown it in the rich soil of imagination, you must resist the temptation to uproot it with doubt, fear, or the incessant seeking of confirmation. The mind that sustains faith does not oscillate between belief and disbelief. It rests in the settled conviction that what has been assumed is already accomplished. This rest is not idleness, but the highest form of spiritual action. It is an inner poise, a steadfast refusal to contradict your assumption by thought, word, or feeling. You become like the prophet who, having heard the promise, waits in quiet certainty for its appointed hour, knowing it will not tarry. There was once a woman who longed for the return of her husband, who had left her in anger. Outwardly, there was no sign that reconciliation was possible. He lived in another city with no correspondence between them. Yet each night, she closed her eyes and felt his presence beside her. She heard his voice, not in supplication or apology, but in the simple joy of ordinary conversation, as though all estrangement were a forgotten dream. Weeks passed, and the world saw nothing change. But within her, the separation had ceased to exist. Then, without warning, a letter came, a tender letter, and soon he returned. The outer event was nothing more than the shadow cast by her sustained inner reality. Many abandon their desire at the first hint of contradiction. They sow the seed, but when the ground looks bare, they declare, it has not worked. They do not realize that the field is most silent before the sprouting, and that the moment of apparent stillness is often the very moment the unseen roots take hold. This is why the inner act must be sustained in feeling long enough to eclipse all outer appearances. The scriptures speak of calling the things that are not seen as though they were, and by this bringing them forth. This is not the shallow act of repeating words, but the deep and living art of embodying the end. If your desire is wealth, you live and move as one who is already wealthy. You do not glance at your purse and lament its emptiness. You feel its fullness in secret, knowing that the purse in the outer world will one day be shaped by the purse you hold within. When the senses mock you, you must learn the holy indifference to their report, not an indifference born of coldness, but of mastery. You have touched the invisible fact, and its reality is stronger to you than the evidence of sight, hearing, or touch. This is why the Master could say, "Believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them." The receiving comes first in consciousness, and the having follows in form. I recall a man who desired to be free from debt. His accounts told him a tale of lack. His creditors spoke of deadlines and penalties. Yet each evening he would retire into the stillness and picture himself receiving letters marked, paid in full. He would place them on the table of his mind and feel the lightness of freedom. Days turned into weeks, and still the debts remained. But he did not alter his vision. Then one morning, quite without his doing, a forgotten investment matured, paying him a sum greater than his total debts. Every creditor was satisfied, and he was left with abundance. His outer relief was but the echo of the inner freedom he had sustained all along. You cannot cling to two masters. Your inner vision and the outer report of the senses. To serve the one, you must ignore the other. This does not mean you deny what the senses present, rather, you refuse to accept it as final. You see it as the passing shadow it is, knowing the substance lies in the unseen state you have assumed. Sustaining the feeling of the wish fulfilled is not a strain, it is an ease. You do not force the vision into being, you relax into it. You let it saturate your mind until it becomes the very climate in which your thoughts live. Then, like a fish in water, you no longer think about the state, you exist within it. This is why many fail. They visit their desire instead of dwelling in it. They look upon it as something to be reached in time, not as something already theirs. But the law is clear. The state you occupy is the state that hardens into fact. You cannot continually return to the state of lack and expect abundance to blossom. You must remain in the state that implies your desire is already realized, and from that dwelling place, the outer world will reshape itself. Consider the parable of the fig tree. When the master found no fruit upon it, he cursed it, and the next day it was withered to the roots. The disciples marveled, but he told them, have faith in God, or more accurately, have the faith of God. The faith of God is creative, sustained, and unwavering. It does not check the tree each hour to see if fruit has appeared. It speaks the word and rests, knowing the word cannot return void. You, too, must speak the word within yourself, not once, but continually, until it becomes the silent knowing that shapes your days. If you seek health, you must feel health, not as something approaching, but as the present fact. If you seek love, you must feel loved, not as a hope, but as an accomplished reality. There will be moments when the outer world presents scenes contrary to your desire. These are not to be feared. They are but the dying gasps of the old state you once inhabited. Do not revive them by giving them emotional reality. Let them pass as clouds pass over the sun, knowing that the light remains constant behind them. Every sustained inner act eventually clothes itself in an outer fact. This is the unchanging law. As the earth cannot refuse to yield when the seed is sown, so the outer world cannot refuse to mirror the state you have consistently felt as real. The only question is, will you remain in that state long enough for the harvest to appear? If your desire seems slow in coming, examine not the outer world, but your own inner dwelling place. Have you wandered from the house of fulfillment into the marketplace of doubt? Have you let the reports of others disturb your inner poise? Return, then, to the secret chamber, shut the door, and there assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled once more. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. It is the inner possession that compels the outer to take shape. When you understand this, you will see that sustaining the feeling is not mere repetition, but the steady inhabiting of the state desired until it becomes the only reality to you. And in time, it will be the only reality to all. Tonight, as you prepare to rest, I want you to understand the sacred power of this threshold between wakefulness and sleep. It is the golden doorway through which all things enter your world. It is not the feverish action of the day that determines the harvest of your life. It is the silent sowing of seeds in the stillness of the night. The outer man believes he must strive, must labor, must wrestle circumstances into compliance. But the inner man knows that the surest way to command the outer world is to impress the mind at that holy moment when consciousness drifts into the deep. For what you take into sleep, you carry into the depths of the subconscious, and there it blossoms in its appointed hour. Scripture tells us, "I will lay me down in peace, and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety." In these words lies the entire mystery. The peace of which it speaks is not the absence of trouble in the outer world, but the inner conviction that the thing desired is already accomplished. To dwell in safety is to rest in the state of the wish fulfilled, knowing it cannot be taken from you. If you fall asleep in lack, you carry lack into the depths. If you fall asleep in fear, you carry fear. But if you fall asleep clothed in the assurance that you already possess the thing you seek, then you have placed the seed in the richest soil known to man, the soil of the eternal I am. I tell you, there is nothing more practical than this. You could exhaust yourself by day in ceaseless motion, only to find that your labor brought you little return. But give a few quiet minutes before sleep to dwelling in the end, and you will discover that unseen hands begin to arrange the outer world for your benefit. The postman will bring the letter you have longed for. The door that was shut will swing open of its own accord. The one who seemed far removed will call your name. All because you dare to claim it in the silence, in the last conscious act before surrendering to the deep. Let us take this moment together. Suppose your desire is abundance, not a trickle of provision, but the overflowing cup. Can you, in the stillness, feel the joy of that state? Can you hear the tone of voice your friends would use if they knew you to be prosperous? Can you walk through your home in imagination and see the evidence of your wealth? Do not strain for it. Do not reach with effort. Let it come gently as one slips into a warm bath. You are not making it so. You are recognizing that it is so. The outer world has not yet announced it, but in the only place where reality begins, your consciousness, it is already finished. This act is not limited to material desire. If health is the thing you seek, you may lie down tonight and feel the ease of movement, the breath flowing freely, the body light and strong. Let the sensation be so real that when you release yourself to sleep, you release yourself from the old state entirely. You will rise in the morning in a body that has begun to conform to that new assumption, and you will be amazed at the way vitality begins to overtake you. There is no need to battle with the day's appearances. The world of fact is always the shadow of an earlier state of consciousness. You need not wrestle with shadows. Simply stand in the light of your new assumption until the shadows rearrange themselves accordingly. When you do this before sleep, you use the greatest leverage given to man, for in that drowsy interval the conscious guard is lowered, and the subconscious, which creates your world, is open and impressionable. Many believe that prayer is the act of pleading with some distant power. But true prayer is the act of assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled and resting in it until it is the most natural thing in the world. And what better time to do this than when the body is already inclined to rest, the mind quieted, the noise of the day falling away. This is why it is written, "Commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still." In this stillness you are not trying to make something happen. You are entering the scene where it has already happened, and you are living there as though it were the most ordinary fact. There is a reason the ancients spoke of visions in the night. Dreams, angels, revelations, all came when the mind was surrendered to that deep passivity where the eternal speaks without interruption. The same stillness is yours tonight. It is not for prophets alone. It is the birthright of every man and woman. You need only choose the scene to which you will surrender. Choose wisely, for what you take into sleep you shall surely meet upon waking. Do not be deceived by the apparent slowness of this law. Just as a seed does not spring into a tree overnight, so your assumption may pass through unseen stages before it blossoms. But know that the process is certain. If you have sown it in the right soil, the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you may rest. And indeed, that is the whole secret: rest. For rest is the perfect act of faith. It says, I have no need to strive, the thing is done. And in that very resting, you declare the end from the beginning, as the scripture says, I have spoken it, I will also bring it to pass. I have purposed it, I will also do it. When you lie down tonight, let the last act of your conscious mind be to dwell not upon the troubles of the day, not upon what is missing, but upon the scene that would follow your desire's fulfillment. And remain there until it takes on all the tones of reality. You will know it is ready when it feels as though you are no longer imagining, but remembering. Then let yourself drift. You need not repeat it endlessly. You have impressed it. Now allow the subconscious to take it and work its perfect work. It is this nightly sowing that changes the entire landscape of a man's life. One who understands it can transform lack into abundance, sickness into health, loneliness into companionship, simply by choosing the state in which he falls asleep. And this is why I say to you, the most important work you do is the work you do in those last waking moments. Guard them as you would guard a treasure, for they are the gateway to all you shall experience. And so it is left to you to decide this very hour what harvest you will call forth. Life will not argue with you, nor will it question your claim. It will simply mirror the state you occupy, whether chosen deliberately or allowed to drift by default. The keys have always been in your possession, yet they work only in the hand that dares to turn them. If you will persist in assuming the reality of your desire, living as though it were already yours, the world will rearrange itself in perfect obedience to that inner command. Do not wait for permission. Do not look for signs before you believe. The sign is the feeling itself, and once it is accepted, all else must follow. Begin now, for now is the appointed time, and nothing can stand between you and the life you have already claimed in the silence of your own heart.